70 ayes, 30 noes.
Leading a supermajority and rolling out an agenda. Plenty of bills were passed. Some were not. Today, our one-on-one with House Speaker Brian Bosma as he reflects on a very active session. Plus, it's the month of May, and the engines are roaring at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We're talking with the VP of Communications about the big month and the big upgrades on the way. We're dropping the green flag as we start this edition of Indianapolis This Week.
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
Good day, I'm Rafael Sanchez. There are a lot of big bills, a big budget deal, and a big tax cut all coming out of the State House as Republicans took advantage of the supermajority they now hold. And there's one man leading all the Republicans in the House. Joining us now is Indiana House Speaker Brian Bosma. The Speaker has served in the Indiana House since 1986, representing District 88. This is his third term as Speaker of the House, serving from 2004 to 2006 and from 2010 to right now. Speaker Bosma, thank you for joining us on Indianapolis This Week.
My pleasure.
The governor has a number of the bills that you've sent to him. Are you ready to handle a veto should the governor choose to veto any of the bills that are before his desk?
Well, that's one of the great parts of our separation of powers here, both at the federal and state level. There's an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch, and it's certainly within the governor's purview to either sign those bills as required, allow them to come into law without his signature, or to veto them. And if he does, we'll, as does happen most every session, something gets vetoed. We have a couple of options. One, we can sit and wait till next year, where the Constitution requires us to address it. If it's something critical, the Speaker of the House also has the ability to call the General Assembly back on July 12th and have a technical correction day, either to deal with errors that might have been discovered that are important or to deal with veto overrides.
Let's talk about money and the budget.
Sure.
$30 billion for the next 2 years. Will that be enough? There's so many unknowns. The economy, the Affordable Health Care Act, so many moving parts.
Right.
Will the $30 billion budget for the next 2 years stand?
Well, the Hoosier taxpayers are really well served. I've seen 15 budgets in my time now, and I have to tell you, there's a lot of pride that went into this one. Not only did we fund our primary goals of returning public education to pre-recession levels, which we did, the most ever appropriated for public schools in this budget, funded roads and bridges, infrastructure to keep our reputation as a crossroads of America. And then over the next 3 years, we'll be returning one of the largest tax cuts in state history to Hoosier taxpayers at every level. There aren't going to be any states that are going to be able to make that same claim.
To get back to my question, I know you don't have a crystal ball, and I know this is only May, but do you think that $30 billion will stand with so many unknowns in the economy and with health care coming up in 2014?
I'm very confident it will. We've been through downturn cycles before, and so this group of legislators was very conservative on keeping reserves intact. We have over $2 billion in reserves. Not very many states, 12% of state revenues. Not many states are going to be able to say that, if any. We also placed about $300 million additional into the tuition reserve account to preserve education funding for the future. We even set some money aside for roads in the future. $400 million put into a trust fund that didn't exist before. So if something very untoward happens, we've got reserves that most states don't. And then we did a couple of other really unusual things for state budgeters. We paid cash for several projects, and we paid off some outstanding state debt. So we actually lowered our debt burden here in the state. Again, you're going to look around the country after this legislative sessions are completed. There's no state that's going to be able to say that they accomplished these things.
When the session began, the governor was really fixated on a 10% income tax cut. You and others said, look, let's wait, let's see what happens. He ended up getting 5% and a whole treasure trove of other cuts that make it to, I think it's $500 million in all cuts. Was 5% enough?
Well, one of the things that folks don't realize is we have the best rated income tax in the nation, lowest level, spread out the right way. So of the 41 states that have an income tax, the tax foundation, the conservative tax foundation, says ours is ranked the best. So we had several outlying taxes where we aren't the best. The death tax, we're 43rd in the nation, on the 7th highest, essentially, tax on people, on heirs when someone dies, so put family businesses, farms, and just regular Hoosiers at risk. We repealed that effective to the start of the year. We've been talking about that for 20 years in Indiana. It was the next thing that had to go. We continued our corporate tax cut, income tax cut, which again boosts employment in the state, makes employers want to employ more folks, and then had enough to do the 5% tax cut for income in the state as well. So it's a right blend. I think it's going to be good for the economy. We said from the start we'd cut the right taxes, the right time, and the right way, and I'm confident that that's what we've done.
A big issue for those folks that live in Indianapolis, which is the largest metro in the state, was the issue of this transit bill. As you may recall, when Mayor Ballard won re-election, the first thing he did was he went to the legislature and said, I want a mass transit bill. Why not allow the counties to vote on this thing? Why did it die in the legislature?
Well, we actually passed that through the House, and with 56 votes to give local municipalities, including the city of Indianapolis, the right to have a referendum on that and have the voters' expression stated. There was reluctance in the Senate, and while we've talked about this issue a couple of times, it's never been voted on before in the General Assembly. So it'll get another hard look. That's where the Senate ended up on a study of it over the summer. Give them a chance to be sure that the program is the right one in the right way, and then perhaps we'll have a chance to look at it again next year.
What is the stumbling block? Because again, we're talking about the most densely populated section of the state, and you're asking the voters to decide whether or not they want to be taxed, so it doesn't have to fall on your hands.
Right.
What was the part that sort of made it difficult to sell to the Senate?
Well, there's a couple of things, and their caution is appropriate in my judgment. Although I was comfortable with letting voters speak on it and having a campaign about it, but while we're the most densely populated part of the state, we're not very densely populated. Central Indiana doesn't compare with the population in Chicago or even in Charlotte, North Carolina, as far as density goes. We're more spread out. There was a great deal of concern about the black hole that some of these projects have become in some areas of the country, where the state has had to step in and bail the programs out when local funds were inadequate to keep them afloat. So there's still some more sales to be done from the advocates, and they're undertaking that already, and those discussions will continue.
You are the first speaker in a long time who had a supermajority, and will continue to have a supermajority, I would imagine. Right. Do you believe that the legislative bills that you passed will allow you to continue that majority moving forward? And again, I know you don't have a crystal ball, and you're very cautious about determining future elections, but
right.
Did you guys do the right thing to keep those numbers, or will the Democrats come back and say, no, we want back in the game?
Well, there's no doubt that politics is cyclical. My actions didn't change, and I told people at the start of the session when they said you've got a supermajority, now you're going to try to overreach. Said what I think is right and wrong won't change from when we had 51 members to when we had 48 members in the minority, or had 60 as we did last year. So what we're trying to do is to do what's right for Hoosiers, and personally, my personal philosophy is do what's right and let the politics shake out for itself.
Once the session was over, the minority party was beginning to send out emails already asking for contributions for the next cycle, calling the budget pathetic and a sham. Did you expect that? I mean, do you expect them to come back with full force to try to unseat you and the party as a whole?
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, that's one of the great things about our country is we have a strong two-party system. Each party is going to have its own viewpoint on things. The budget that was passed, I can tell you, is one of the most conservative yet broad-reaching budgets in 30 years. It had bipartisan support. There was Democrat support for it as well. So the political parties have got to say what they've got to say. I'm very confident that we did what's right for Hoosiers, which was what we set out to do.
And before you let you go, highlight, low light this session? Did you have it either or?
A highlight or low light? Oh, gracious. Let's see. Highlight would have to be really coming together on the tax cut and making it a win for all who had professed an opinion in that regard, including the governor. And low light would probably be the infection that I had that took me out of the game for a week. It was unexpected, and to get back.
But you're healthy. Look at you.
Yeah, I'm
Under
great.
These bright lights, you look fantastic.
Well, I'm still gimping just a little bit, but that was just unexpected. Okay. But little bit of time out of the saddle, right back to it, and finish the last 3 weeks of the session very strong.
Speaker of the House, Brian Bosma, thank you so much. Please come back again to Indianapolis this week. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
We'll be right back after this. Joining us now are two of our political insiders, Democrat Laura Beck and Republican Jennifer Hollowell. We just heard from the House Speaker talking about this legislative session, and he thought it all went well. Did it go well, Laura Beck?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask, Rafael
I'm asking
Sanchez.
you.
And happy Cinco de Mayo. I think I'd like to also say that first before we start out today.
Okay.
Happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone.
So all the festivities
all the festivities are now, yeah. Well, I think it depends on who you ask. I mean, I think that what was really interesting with the tax cut particularly, and I'm sure that Jennifer can elaborate on that from the Republican side, but my one takeaway on the tax cut was it wasn't as much as what Governor Pence wanted originally, but at the same time, it really was a referendum on Americans for Prosperity. They came in here, they said we're going to have a big ad campaign, we're going to spend 6 figures on advertisements, and it didn't move the needle at all. So it begs the questions, is the Tea Party losing momentum in Indiana because we had the spectacular failure of Richard Murdoch last year, and now this, or was it that our legislators just weren't going to listen to the Washington way and go ahead with the Indiana way?
I'll take it if you disagree with everything she had to say.
Absolutely.
She might.
It was a great victory. It was a great victory for Hoosiers. It was also a great victory for Republican legislators, Governor Pence, and it certainly did move the needle because the outcome certainly was a 5% income tax cut, and in addition to other tax cuts, right, and the repeal of the inheritance tax. So overall, it was the single largest tax cut in Indiana history, which is great for hard-working Hoosiers, family farms, small businesses. It will have an impact over the years to come, and it really helps Indiana stand out to businesses who are looking for a place to locate, that this is a business-friendly state and a good tax climate.
Did the legislature send the executive branch a message in that, look, we'll take care of the bills, Governor, you govern? I mean, was there a message there sent to the governor from this legislature?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, this is the governor's first legislative session, right? And if you look at it,
But Republicans early on said, look, Governor, we're not going to give you what you want. We're in charge. We write the bills.
Let's look at the result. The result is a great compromise. The governor led on an income tax cut. We got an income tax cut, 5%. We also got other tax relief for Hoosiers. And so, I mean, really, I think it's a good example of how folks can work together and come to a great compromise that's good for everyone.
How do Democrats recover from this? Because the minute that legislature came to an end, it was called the largest tax cut in history. Republicans really took charge of this. It's a great day in Indiana. How do Democrats recover from what apparently is a great message?
I don't think it's necessarily how we recover. I think it's that, yeah, there was a tax cut, and it's a shame we didn't have more of a tax cut like the governor wanted, number one. The second thing, though, is let's talk about governing. You know, we just talked about the legislature and the governor. Governor Pence earlier this week said he had serious considerations, or he had concerns, I'm sorry, about Senate Bill 621, which is the Republican power grab for Indianapolis, which essentially strips away a lot of powers that the Democrats arguably hold, that the Republicans will say it's for government streamlining, but it's really not.
Do you think they'll veto that?
Well, that's my question. My question is he going to veto that? Because what he has done and what he has set a precedent all along through Washington really is that even though it might be popular publicly or with a certain group of his party, he will veto that. He won't support it, basically, because it encroaches on states' rights. So if he vetoes it, it is consistent with steps he's taken in the past.
So you're calling for a veto?
Well, I hope he does a veto because it's bad government. It's not good policy.
Will he veto the
I don't think he will, and here's why. It's sound policy. Senate Bill 621 increases accountability for elected officials. It increases fiscal responsibility. It saves taxpayers money, and it makes government more efficient. These are the kinds of things that fall in line with Republican principles, and so certainly I hope that he signs it.
It's an unprecedented move by a legislative body to legislate to benefit one political party over another here in Marion County, which is controlled by Democrats. So what's the legislature going to do next? Go to Evansville and encroach on what Evansville does for their municipal government?
Laura knows this is different. Indianapolis, Marion County is different.
What I'm going to do next is ask you ladies, is what will we see in the next legislature? What was missed this time that we'll see when we return next January? Anything?
Well, hopefully we'll see more tax relief. I think that's a possibility. Potentially more education reform legislation. Some of that passed this year. I think there's some left to be done that we can see next year.
What do you think we'll see in 2014? Anything?
I think the biggest thing I hope for is mass transit. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a cricket stadium before we get mass transit here in central Indiana. I also think it would be really important if we could make some headway with early childhood education. I mean, we are one of 11 states without an early childhood education program, and I really, really hope we can move in that direction. We spent a lot of time this session, unfortunately, thanks to Senator Travis Holdman, on the ag-gag bill and on transvaginal ultrasounds and things like that. None of that
we'll see Democrats be effective or lead on an issue. I mean, I don't think
Democrats have led on an issue all along, but let's hope we can make it in that way.
Green room. But I'm going to say this. You can stay up to date with the best in the business. These are political insiders. You can follow them every time on our Capitol Watch blog. You can find all their comments, our link on our webpage, theindychannel.com. It's what many would call the greatest month of the year in Indianapolis. The world is about to visit us yet again to visit the best drivers as they take the track. We are getting ready for the Indy 500 right here at RTV6 and also looking ahead to the improvements coming to the Speedway thanks to a $100 million in funding from the state. Joining us now is the Chief Operating Officer and Vice President of Communications of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Doug Bowles. Doug, thank you for joining us. What does it mean, this $100 million that we're hearing about?
It means an awful lot for a 104-year-old facility that hasn't had a big major face-up or an upgrade in really since it was built. So what we were approaching the state to do was create a partnership so that they could help us fund some things that on our own we couldn't fund. So I think what you're going to see over the next year, you're going to see some significant planning on our part. We're going to create a master plan that really figures out how we want to spend that money. We'll work with the commission that the state creates and the state budget agency to make sure that any improvements that we're going to make in the facility have a return on investment, not only for us as a business, but for the taxpayers of the state of Indiana. And then we're going to measure that by the way we're going to increase attendance, we're going to increase tourism, we're going to increase spending in our community to make that work. So I think over the next 6 months or so, we'll begin to lay that out. And then really in the beginning of 2014 and then by 2015, you'll see significant changes at the Speedway.
How is the Speedway dealing with the criticism, which you've already heard? You're the only sporting industry up to now that has never asked for tax dollars. We've seen it from the other sporting venues. You sort of remained away from that. How are you responding to that? And because of that, is there more pressure on you to make sure that this money is spent well and returned back to the Treasury?
Well, I think there is more pressure, and I can tell you that the Holman George family and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Corporation, as we started thinking through this process, it was difficult for all of us to put our heads around in our arms and just say, look, this is where we have to go. And we approached the state with an awful lot of humility. We think over 104 years we've given an awful lot to the Indianapolis community and the Indiana community, but we are just at a position where this facility, in order for us to keep it up in its state that it is, and be able to make the improvements we think are needed to keep us competitive. The only place really we could go is to talk to the taxpayers of the state of Indiana and say, we know this is tough, but we think we can create a program that's going to actually generate revenue and that we can all be proud to be partnering in.
And how will this allow us to have that competitive edge? It is a competitive industry. You have to deal with a lot of different other moving parts when it comes to entertainment. How will this money really help?
Well, you think about when the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was created, it wasn't created to be an entertainment venue. It was created to help the automotive industry in Indiana and the companies that were building automobiles to give them a place to test their vehicles. And over time, we've created this wonderful tradition of the 500 miles on Memorial Day. In the last 10 years, racetracks have been created all over the country, many in the Midwest that now compete with us, that were designed for the fan experience so the fan can see all the way around. It's got amenities and seats that you expect when you go to a place like Lucas or Bankers Life Field. So we want to do some of those things so the fan experience is upgraded when they're at the facility. But at the same time, what makes us special and what makes us different is that tradition, so we have to balance the two.
Speaking of tradition, I can't wait to see the yellow shirts when the track opens again here in a matter of days. Security, will it be much greater this time around?
Well, security is certainly top of mind for us, and as it is for many events around the country. It is something that we're paying attention to, given what's happened in Boston and some of the things that have gone on there. But you think back all the way to 9/11, our facility, in conjunction with great local law enforcement agencies, our state law enforcement agencies, and with folks like the FBI and the Secret Service and others at the federal level, we have regular communications with them more often as we get close to May. So we feel like we're as prepared as we can be. What we are doing, though, is looking at what happens at other events, and if there's things that we can change. There are things that are going to happen in the background to increase safety that folks don't necessarily know about. The one thing I think our fan will notice this year, in terms of our cooler restrictions, we historically have been pretty lax in those. This year we won't be. Okay. It's an 18 by 14 by 14 cooler. If it doesn't fit inside our tools, you're not going to be able to bring it in. So we're going to do some of those things to make sure that, that our fan is safe.
Are you excited? Because I'm looking forward to going out there on race day and Florence Henderson and the parade and Purdue Marching Band. Are you excited? And what can we expect this May at the track?
Well, I think, you know,
Are you excited?
I'm excited.
All right.
And I think everybody at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is, and at some level, everybody in central Indiana. This is a rite of spring for all of us here that have grown up here and that live here, and it is a certain sign that spring is coming and summer's coming afterwards. So we're absolutely excited, and we're excited about the product I think we're going to see on track. So last year we introduced brand new cars with brand new engines, and we had a fantastic race. It went down to the last lap with Takuma Sato trying to pass Dario and what ended up to be a crash in the final corner. We think with a year under the belts of the these teams and these drivers. The cars are going to be faster this year. They're going to be more competitive. The depth of our field is going to be stronger. So we're really looking forward to the on-track product. But more than anything, I'm just looking forward to May 11th when those gates open and we can start hearing the sounds of race cars on our track.
And I think we all take a great deal of pride in knowing that we do live in the racing capital of the world.
Well, we do live in the racing capital of the world, and that's part of the reason the legislation took place, right? We wanted to make sure that Indianapolis remains the capital of the world. We've got such a foundation in terms of cottage industry that's built on the reputation here in Indianapolis. Some of it built by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but most of it built by Hoosiers, how we adopt motorsports and how we've adopted the automotive industry. So that's part of, how we want to protect that, is make sure that we're investing the right way to make sure that industry survives.
And Doug, all we need is for our friend Kevin Gregory, the best meteorologist in the city, to give us a great sunny day on that race day, right?
If he had the power to do that, that would be awesome.
Power.
Because that is, you think about last year, we had great weather. He gave us great weather all last year. So he may have to give up a few days this year for all that he gave us last year.
We love Kevin Gregory. Doug Bowles, Chief Operating Officer at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Come back again.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after the break. This last week was a long one for Indiana schools, but tomorrow ISTEP testing will continue, and it will be at regular testing levels. The State Department of Education has assurances from the company CTB McGraw-Hill operating the testing that things will work out just fine. 2 days of testing earlier this week, as you may recall, were canceled because of many, many problems. So just a few reminders for preparing your kids to finish out their ISTEP testing. Get a good night's sleep, but kids should get at least 8 hours worth, eat a good breakfast before going to school, and make sure your kid gets to school on time. Also make sure that there are no medical appointments during the testing period. That's it for this edition of Indianapolis This Week. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rafael Sanchez. Make sure to join Drew Smith tonight for RTV6 News at 6. Have a great Cinco de Mayo.